Good morning, dear friend. Imagine stepping out onto your porch as the day is just beginning. The air is cool and gentle, carrying the faint scent of earth after a quiet night. A bird hops across the fence, and somewhere in the distance you hear the soft trickle of water. The garden feels like a secret waiting to be discovered, a place where time slows down and the world seems kinder. I want you to picture yourself there holding a warm cup of tea, your hands resting easily on the railing. You don't need a fortune to make this garden bloom with beauty. You don't need the strength you had in your 20s either. What you need is a touch of imagination, a bit of patience, and a willingness to see old things with fresh eyes. Today, we're not spending money on shiny new decorations. We're turning what's already around us, forgotten teacups, worn-out boots, broken pots, into something magical. Each piece has its own story, just like you. And when we give it a second life in the garden, it whispers back to us, I am still useful, still beautiful. So let's walk slowly together through these ideas. Think of it less like a project and more like a gentle visit to a friend's home, where every corner holds a memory, every object a second chance. Do you remember the first set of teacups you ever owned? Maybe they were a wedding gift, or perhaps you picked them up at a yard sale for just a few coins. Over time, one chipped, another cracked, and soon they were pushed to the back of the cupboard, forgotten. Yet, like so many things in life, a little flaw does not erase their charm. It simply makes them more interesting. Those old teacups, my dear friend, are waiting for a second chance. Imagine holding one in your hand now, its handle slightly worn from years of use. Instead of leaving it hidden away, let's bring it back into the light. A teacup is the perfect size for a small plant, especially herb succulents or tiny flowers. And the best part is you don't need much strength or heavy lifting to work with them. Here's how we'll do it. Take your chosen teacup, give it a gentle wash, and if it doesn't already have a crack in the bottom for drainage, slip in a few small pebbles. These will keep your plant's roots from sitting in water. Next, add a handful of light potting soil, nothing too heavy, just enough to cradle the plant. Press a sprig of thyme, a clipping of mint, or perhaps a small succulent into the soil. Pat it down softly with your fingers, and top it with one more pebble for decoration. That's it. No backbending, no digging, just a quiet little project you can do right at the table with a window full of light. Now think of where you might place it. On the kitchen windowsill, catching the morning sun. On a bedside table, bringing a touch of green to your rest. Or outside, lined up on the porch railing like little soldiers of beauty. Wherever it sits, the teacup becomes more than a dish. It becomes a story, a reminder that nothing truly goes to waste when love and imagination are applied. I once knew a neighbor who kept a whole row of teacup planters on her porch. Each cup was different, some floral, some plain, some chipped beyond repair. But together they looked like a family, mismatched yet united. She told me that every time she watered them, she thought of the hands that had once lifted those cups, the conversations they had witnessed, the laughter that had drifted above them. It's as if the cups are still serving. She said only now they're serving life. Isn't that a beautiful thought, that objects like people can carry on with new purpose even after their first use has ended? A teacup may no longer hold your morning tea, but it can still cradle a living thing. And every time you glance at it, you are reminded that beauty isn't about perfection. It's about presence. So if you have a chipped cup tucked away, don't throw it out. Give it soil, give it green, and watch how it shines again. In your hands, it is no longer broken, it is reborn. Do you remember the sound of an old dresser drawer sliding open the wood, groaning softly with age? Perhaps you once kept sweaters folded neatly inside or stored family photographs tucked in the corners. Over the years, the dresser may have broken, or perhaps you replaced it with something newer, sleeker. But those drawers, sturdy, wooden, and full of memory, still hold the power to serve. Instead of letting them gather dust, let's welcome them into the garden. An old drawer is a natural little raised bed. It's shallow enough to sit comfortably on a table or a porch without straining your back, and wide enough to hold herbs, flowers, or even a row of cheerful lettuce. You don't need to hammer or lift anything heavy, just a bit of soil and your imagination. Here's how to begin. Find one or two drawers from an old chest, preferably made of wood. If the wood is worn or peeling, don't worry, that weathered look gives them character. If you like, you can brush on a coat of paint, something soft, like sage green, pale yellow, or even classic white. Or you can leave them rustic, letting the scratches and faded varnish tell their story. Next, line the bottom with a piece of burlap old fabric or even a few sheets of newspaper. This will keep the soil from falling out while still allowing water to drain. Then scoop in potting soil enough to fill the drawer about 3/4 of the way. Now comes the joy choosing what to plant. Herbs like parsley, basil, and chives thrive in shallow soil. Petunias or marigolds will add splashes of color. And if you prefer something edible, a drawer full of leafy greens like spinach or lettuce can be both beautiful and useful. Once your plants are nestled in place, the drawer somewhere easy to reach. On a low table beside your porch chair, or even stacked one on top of another for a tiered effect. Some gardeners place small wheels on the bottom so the drawer can be rolled around to follow the sun like a gentle traveling garden that comes to you. I remember visiting a friend who had transformed 3 drawers from her grandmother's dresser. She painted them robin's egg blue and placed them in her backyard. One drawer held strawberries, another lavender, and the third cheerful pansies. She said that when she watered them, she thought of her grandmother folding clothes at that dresser, humming softly. Now those drawers held life in a different way, still serving her family, still bringing joy. The beauty of drawer beds is their accessibility. You don't have to kneel or stoop. You can tend to them from a chair with the plants at just the right height. For many of us, bending low to the ground is no longer easy, but that doesn't mean gardening must slip from our hands. These small raised beds bring the soil up to meet you, and there's something comforting about it too. To take an object that once belonged indoors close to our daily lives and let it bloom outside. It reminds us that life is not about discarding what grows old, but about giving it room to flourish again. A drawer that once held secrets now bursts with green sunlight touching it in a way it never knew before. So, dear friend, the next time you see an old drawer left on the curb or hidden in your attic, don't think of it as junk. Think of it as a little garden waiting to happen. With your care, it can hold more than clothes or keepsakes. It can hold new beginnings. Do you remember those old metal colanders, the ones that strained pasta for family dinners or rinsed garden tomatoes until the water turned red with their sweetness? Often dented and worn, they eventually get pushed to the back of the cupboard, replaced by shinier tools. But dear friend, don't be too quick to throw them away. That colander is already halfway to being the perfect hanging basket. After all, it was designed to drain water, and isn't that exactly what a good planter needs? Picture this. You find an old colander at a thrift shop or perhaps tucked in your kitchen. Its handles are still strong, its base covered with neat little holes. With just a touch of imagination, it becomes a charming garden accent, dangling with trailing vines or bright blossoms. The best part, it's light and easy to work with, no heavy lifting, no complicated construction. Here's how we do it. First, give the colander a quick rinse. If it's rusty, a little scrubbing will do, though don't worry about a few marks, they add character. Next, cut a piece of coconut liner burlap or even an old ragged towel to fit inside. This will keep soil from spilling through while still letting water drain freely. Set it inside the bowl, tucking it against the edges. Now scoop in your potting soil, but don't overfill. Leave a little room for watering. Choose plants that will spill over the edges gracefully. Petunias, ivy, or sweet potato vines work beautifully. For a more practical touch, herbs like oregano or thyme not only grow well but release a delicious scent when you brush past them. Press them gently into the soil, patting around the roots with your fingertips. To hang it, thread sturdy twine or chains through the handles, tying them securely. Then find a sunny spot on your porch under a tree branch or by the garden gate. Soon, the colander will swing softly in the breeze, spilling green life from its sides like a fountain. I once saw a neighbor hang 3 mismatched colanders along her fence. One was painted cherry red, another a faded silver, and the third a soft yellow. Each held different flowers, but together they looked like cheerful lanterns glowing with color. She told me, "These old kitchen tools still feed me, just in a different way." Isn't that the truth? The colander no longer strains soup broth or pasta, but it still nurtures. It still serves. Much like us, as we grow older, our roles may change, but our usefulness, our beauty, our ability to bring life into the world remains. So the next time you see an old colander at a garage sale for $1, smile. You're not looking at a cooking pot gone useless. You're seeing tomorrow's hanging garden, a gentle reminder that with a little care, everything can bloom again. Do you remember the old wooden ladder that once leaned against the side of the house? Paint splattered across its steps, faithfully used for cleaning gutters, picking apples, or hanging Christmas lights. Over time, its joints may have loosened, its rungs worn smooth until it no longer felt safe to climb. Many would toss it aside, calling it broken. But in the garden, dear friend, even a weary ladder can rise again, not to lift us up, but to lift our plants toward the light. A ladder is already shaped like a display. Each step forms a shelf, and its angled stance makes it easy to see everything at once. With almost no effort, it can become a charming plant stand, offering a home for herbs, flowers, or even decorative lanterns. And because it stands tall, tending to it is gentle on the back, you can reach most of the plants without bending or crouching. Here's how to begin. Bring your old ladder outside and dust it off. If the wood feels fragile, you can brush on a quick coat of sealant, but often the worn, weathered look is what makes it so beautiful. Place it against a wall, a fence, or even freestanding in a corner of the patio. Now comes the fun part, arranging your treasures. On the top step, place something small and delicate like a trailing ivy or a pot of baby's breath. On the middle rungs, sturdier plants such as geraniums, mint, or cheerful pansies will shine. And on the bottom, perhaps a heavier terracotta pot with basil or rosemary, their fragrance rising up with the warmth of the sun. You can even tuck in non-plant treasures, a lantern, a little bird figurine, or a watering can filled with marigolds. I once visited a friend who had turned her father's old ladder into a vertical garden on her porch. Each step was lined with mismatched clay pots, their edges chipped but full of life. She told me, "Every time I water these plants, I feel as though he's still helping me reach higher." That ladder no longer bore the weight of a man, but it carried the weight of memory and the joy of renewal. The beauty of a ladder stand is its accessibility. Everything is lifted closer to eye level, so instead of stooping, you can stroll by and tend to each pot with ease. It invites you to linger, to pause, and admire each bloom, almost like flipping through the pages of a picture book. And philosophically, isn't there something profound here? A tool once used for reaching heights now helps beauty reach upward. What once supported our work now supports our rest. It is a reminder that even when our purpose shifts, we can still stand tall, offering joy in new ways. So, dear friend, before you cast aside that old ladder, picture it instead as a tower of life in your garden. It may no longer be safe for climbing, but it can still help your plants, and perhaps your spirit rise a little closer to the sun. Do you remember when glass mason jars were a staple in every kitchen? Some of us used them to hold pickles or preserves lined neatly on shelves like little jewels of summer. Others collected them over the years, tucking nails or buttons inside. And sometimes they simply sit forgotten in a box in the garage, their glass still strong, their usefulness waiting to be rediscovered. Dear friend, those jars are more than storage, they are lanterns waiting to glow. Imagine sitting outside on a warm evening, a gentle breeze brushing your cheek and soft light spilling across the garden like fireflies caught in glass. Mason jars make this possible with almost no effort. They are heavy enough to be safe, with candles wide enough to hold pebbles or sand, and easy to decorate with ribbons, lace, or paint. Here's how to begin. Take your jar and wash it clean, letting it dry in the sun. Slip a handful of small pebbles or sand inside the bottom. This keeps the candle steady. Then place a simple tea light or a small battery-powered LED candle inside. If you prefer, wrap the jar's neck with twine or thin wire so it can hang from a tree branch, a fence post, or even along the railing of your porch. For extra charm, you might paint the glass with soft frosted patterns or glue bits of lace around the outside so the candlelight filters through in delicate designs. Some even drop in sprigs of lavender or rosemary beside the candle, letting the warmth release a gentle fragrance. I once knew a couple who strung dozens of mason jar lanterns along their garden path for an anniversary evening. The jars glowed in rows, lighting the way like a trail of stars fallen to earth. They told me later that those jars made the night feel magical, as though they were walking through a dream. The beauty of mason jar lanterns is how forgiving they are. You don't need perfect supplies. Every jar, whether clear tinted or a little scratched, creates a different light. And because they are small, they are easy to move, easy to hold, and easy to create while sitting at the table, no bending or lifting required. And isn't that what life teaches us, that even the simplest vessels can shine when given a spark? A jar meant for storing pickles can become a beacon of light in the dark, just as we too can glow in unexpected ways, bringing warmth to others when we least expect it. So, dear friend, don't let those jars sit in a dusty box. Bring them out, light them up, and let your garden glow with second chances. Do you remember the wooden chairs that once circled the family table, creaking slightly as children leaned back too far, or as hands rested on them after long meals? Over time, one chair leg cracks, another wobbles, and soon the whole set begins to dwindle. But dear friend, the back of an old chair has a hidden beauty. It is already shaped to help something climb. With a bit of care, that chair back can be reborn as a trellis. Picture it leaning gently against the garden fence, or standing firm in a flower bed. The slats and spindles, once supporting tired backs, now guide tender vines upward. Instead of being tossed to the curb, it becomes a frame for growth, a sculpture that blends memory with new life. Here's how to do it. First, detach the chair back from the seat. If the wood is chipped, that's fine. Imperfections add charm. Brush it clean, and if you wish, paint it in a cheerful color, sage green, sky blue, or even leave it rustic with the natural wood showing its years. Place it in the soil a few inches deep or wedge it securely against a wall or planter. Then plant something that loves to climb: sweet peas, morning glories, or even beans if you want a useful harvest. With time, the vines will twine up, weaving themselves through the slats, creating a living artwork. I once visited a friend who had turned 4 chair backs into a garden border. Each one supported a different flower, one with pink clematis, another with purple morning glories, and the rest with ivy spilling down. She said these chairs once held conversations, now they hold blossoms. And it was true, the garden felt like a gathering, as though the chairs were still offering welcome. The best part is accessibility. You can tend to climbing plants easily at waist or eye level with no need for stooping. Watching the vines stretch upward can feel like watching time itself, slow, steady, full of patience. And doesn't it remind us of our own lives? What once held us up may find a second purpose in holding something else. Support takes many forms. A chair back may no longer seat a guest, but it can still invite beauty to rise. So, dear friend, the next time you see a broken chair, don't think of loss. Think of vines curling upward, blossoms opening, and life continuing in another form. The chair has not ended its story. It has only begun a new chapter. Do you remember the first time you accidentally broke a flower pot? Perhaps it slipped from your hands, or maybe the frost cracked it one winter night. There's always that moment of disappointment when we see shards of clay scattered on the ground. But dear friend, broken pots are not the end of beauty, they are the beginning of imagination. In fact, nothing makes a more enchanting fairy garden than a pot that's been chipped, fractured, or even split in two. Picture this: a large terracotta pot, broken at the side with pieces missing. Instead of throwing it away, you fill it with soil, tucking in moss, tiny ferns, and miniature flowers. The broken edges become terraces, like steps leading up a hillside. You can wedge smaller shards inside, creating levels, paths, and little walls. Suddenly, what once seemed ruined becomes a landscape fit for a fairy tale. Here's how to make it: take your broken pot and place it in a stable spot somewhere you can see it without bending too low, perhaps on a porch table or raised shelf. Add a base layer of soil. Then take the largest broken shard and press it into the soil at an angle, forming a little ledge. Add more shards to create a winding staircase or tiered garden beds. Plant small succulents, moss, or ground covers that stay petite. If you wish, sprinkle pebbles as pathways, or add a tiny figurine, perhaps a birdhouse, a bench, or even a miniature fairy door. I once knew a grandmother who made one of these for her grandchildren. She placed a tiny ceramic house among the moss and tucked in marigolds no bigger than coins. The children would visit each week, convinced that fairies had danced there at night. The broken pot became a stage for wonder, a place where imagination and nature held hands. The beauty of this project is how forgiving it is. No piece is too broken, no crack too wide. Each flaw simply adds character. And unlike heavy construction, all the work is gentle placing shards, tucking plants, sprinkling stones. It can be done seated at a table with no strain on back or knees. And isn't that the heart of gardening itself, to see possibility where others see loss? To look at a broken vessel and find a way to cradle life within it. In many ways, the broken pot fairy garden is a mirror of us. Life may chip us, seasons may crack us, but within those fractures grows a beauty that could not exist otherwise. So, dear friend, the next time you hear the sharp sound of a pot shattering, don't sigh in defeat. Smile gently, for what looks like the end of usefulness may just be the start of a tiny world full of magic. Do you remember the days when we saved every tin can? Coffee cans, soup cans, even those from peaches and syrup because they were just too sturdy to toss away. Some of us kept them in the garage filled with nails or screws. Others poked holes in the bottoms and planted geraniums for windowsills. Those cans, dear friend, still hold great potential. With only a touch of creativity, they can become the perfect little herb garden. Picture a row of shiny or weathered cans lined neatly on your porch railing, each one bursting with green basil, parsley, mint, or rosemary. They catch the sun in the morning and release their fragrance when you brush past them. No bending, no heavy lifting, just a simple, accessible way to grow fresh herbs right at your fingertips. Here's how to begin. Rinse your cans well and remove the labels. If you like, you can paint them in cheerful colors, wrap them with twine, or leave them bare for a rustic industrial look. Take a hammer and nail tap gently to make 3 or 4 small drainage holes in the bottom. Set the can on a saucer or tray to catch excess water. Fill it 2/3 with light potting soil. Then nestle in your herb seedling or scatter seeds on top, pressing them softly with your fingers. Add just enough water to moisten, and you're done. Place your cans in a spot with good sunlight, perhaps a kitchen windowsill, a patio table, or a low shelf. Because they're lightweight, you can move them easily to chase the sun or bring them closer when watering. And when you're cooking, there's nothing more satisfying than stepping outside and snipping a few fresh sprigs for your meal. I once visited a neighbor who had stacked tin cans into a wooden crate, making a tiered display of herbs. Each can was painted with the plant's name, thyme, oregano, dill, and together they looked like a living recipe box. She said, "It makes me feel like I'm still providing, still bringing flavor to the table, even on quiet days." That's the heart of this project. Tin cans may be discarded by most, but in our hands, they nurture life again. They remind us that usefulness doesn't end when the label is torn off. And for us too, even when seasons change, we can still bring freshness, still flavor the world around us. So, dear friend, don't throw those cans into the recycling bin just yet. Give them soil, give them green, and let them stand proudly as a garden of second chances. Do you remember the heavy mixing bowls that once sat in the kitchen filled with bread dough rising under a towel or fruit piled high from summer harvests? Perhaps one has a small chip along the rim now, or the glaze is faded from years of washing. Instead of hiding it away, dear friend, why not give it a new home beneath the open sky? That old bowl can become a bird bath, inviting life and song into your garden. Picture a shallow, wide bowl resting gently on a stand, a tree stump, an overturned flower pot, or even a stack of old bricks. Inside, clear water shimmers, catching the sunlight. A sparrow hops to the edge, dipping her beak for a sip. A robin splashes playfully, sending droplets sparkling into the air. Suddenly, the garden feels alive, not just with plants, but with voices of wings and song. Here's how to begin. Choose a bowl that's broad and not too deep, about 2 to 3 inches is perfect. Wash it well, making sure no soap residue lingers. Find a stable base, an upturned clay pot, a metal stand, or even a wooden crate. Place the bowl securely on top. If you'd like, surround it with stones or tuck it among flowers to blend naturally into the garden. Fill it with fresh water, just enough for birds to splash and bathe safely. To keep it welcoming, change the water every couple of days. If you'd like to add charm, place a flat stone inside the bowl. It gives small birds a perch to rest on. And if you prefer to watch from indoors, set it somewhere you can see from your favorite chair so their visits bring joy to your quiet afternoons. I once knew a woman who placed her grandmother's cracked porcelain bowl atop a stump in her yard. Every morning she'd sit on her porch with tea and watch the birds gather. It feels like my grandmother's table has moved outdoors, she told me, still serving, but in a new way. The bowl was no longer just a dish, it had become a fountain of life-drawing beauty she could never have bought. Isn't that the magic of gardening? To take something ordinary, even worn, and let it become extraordinary with a change of purpose. A bowl that once held bread now holds sunlight and wings. It reminds us that usefulness doesn't end, it transforms. So, dear friend, the next time you find an old bowl with too many chips to serve at the table, don't set it aside. Fill it with water, place it among the flowers, and wait. Before long, your garden will sing with new visitors, all grateful for the gift of a simple second life. Do you remember the last time you gathered with friends or family, sharing laughter over a meal and a few wine bottles remained after the evening ended? Many of us rinse them, drop them in a recycling bin, and never think of them again. But, dear friend, those bottles can do more than hold memories. They can shape your garden paths into glowing ribbons of color. With a little imagination, wine bottles become edging-lining walkways or flower beds with glass that sparkles in the sun. Picture it, a garden path bordered by upright bottles, their necks buried in the soil, their bodies catching light like emerald amber or sapphire gems. On summer afternoons, the sun pours through them, casting jewel-toned reflections on the ground. At dusk, they catch the fading light and glow softly as if the garden itself is lit from within. Here's how to make it: collect bottles of similar height. Though the colors may be mixed, that's part of the beauty. Wash them well and peel off the labels, or leave them if you like the rustic look. Choose the place you'd like to edge a walkway, a flower bed, or even the base of a tree. With a small hand, trowel dig a shallow trench just deep enough to bury the bottlenecks a few inches into the soil. Stand each bottle upside down, pressing it firmly into the ground. Continue side by side until your border is complete. If you'd like alternate colors for a patterned effect, or line an entire stretch with deep green bottles for a uniform look. Some gardeners even slip solar fairy lights inside the bottles, letting them glow at night like lanterns. I once visited a friend who edged her vegetable patch with cobalt blue bottles she had saved over years. She told me every bottle here holds a memory of a meal shared. Now they guard the food that feeds me. It was beautiful not just for the color, but for the story woven into each piece of glass. The best part is how low effort this project can be. Once the bottles are pressed into the soil, they require almost no maintenance. And because the bottles raise the border higher, they also help keep soil and mulch contained, making the garden tidier without bending or fussing. And isn't it true in life as well? What once held something fleeting, wine poured and gone, can still stand tall, catching light and giving shape. The bottles remind us that moments never truly disappear. They can be arranged into something lasting, guiding our steps forward. So, dear friend, before you toss those bottles into a bin, hold them to the light. Imagine them glowing along your garden path, reflecting not only sunlight, but the memories of good times shared. In your hands, they can edge the way to something more enduring, beauty built from what was once empty. Do you remember the boots that once carried you through long walks, rainy days, or afternoons spent in the garden? Maybe they were work boots, scuffed and strong, or perhaps a pair of bright rubber rain boots splashed through puddles with grandchildren. Over time, soles wear thin seams, split, and we set them aside. But, dear friend, even tired boots can stand tall again as planters that cradle flowers with character and charm. Picture it, a pair of worn boots sitting by the porch steps, their leather softened by years, their toes planted firmly in the earth. From inside them rises a tuft of cheerful blossoms, marigolds, pansies, or trailing ivy spilling over like laughter. Each boot tells a story, and together they become a conversation piece. A reminder that usefulness doesn't always end when walking does. Here's how to begin. Take an old pair of boots, leather or rubber. If the soles already have holes, perfect, they'll serve as drainage. If not, you can gently poke a few small holes in the bottom with a screwdriver or nail. Fill the boots halfway with gravel or small stones to help water flow, then add potting soil until nearly full. Tuck in a plant that will thrive in this small space: petunias for colorment, for fragrance, or succulents if you want low maintenance. Press the soil gently and give it a drink of water. Set the boots where they can be admired on the porch by the garden gate. or even clustered in a row like soldiers of bloom. For a whimsical touch, you can paint them adding patterns or bright colors. Some gardeners even line several mismatched boots along a fence, creating a parade of flowers that makes every passerby smile. I once visited a friend who used her late husband's work boots as planters. She placed them at the base of a tree, each filled with red geraniums. She said, "It feels like he's still walking with me in the garden." Those boots no longer carried footsteps, but they carried love, memory, and new life. The beauty of boot planters is their accessibility. You can prepare them at a table, then simply set them down where you want them, no heavy lifting or deep digging required. And each time you see them, you're reminded that even what looks worn out can cradle something fresh and beautiful. And isn't that how life is, dear friend? We may not walk as fast or as far as before, but we can still stand proudly holding beauty where we are planted. Boots may no longer journey across muddy fields, but they can still bloom where they rest. So don't throw away those weary shoes. Give them soil, give them flowers, and let them stand as little monuments to endurance and renewal. Do you remember the bicycle you once rode down neighborhood streets? The wind rushing past your face, the bell ringing cheerfully as you waved to neighbors. Perhaps it was your first taste of freedom as a child, or later a companion for quiet rides in the evening. Over the years, chains rust, wheels wobble, and soon the bicycle rests in the shed, no longer carrying you anywhere. But dear friend, even a weary bicycle can still travel, this time into the garden carrying flowers instead of riders. Picture it leaning gracefully against a tree or fence, its frame painted in soft pastels or left rusty for a vintage charm. Instead of a basket of groceries, the handlebars cradle trailing petunias. A pair of old wire baskets fastened to the back overflow with marigolds and ivy. The wheels, though unmoving, frame the blossoms like spokes of a floral sunburst. Suddenly, the bicycle is no longer forgotten metal, it's a sculpture of memory and bloom. Here's how to make it: find an old bike no longer safe to ride, but still sturdy enough to stand. Brush off loose rust, and if you like, coat it with a spray of paint. Cheerful turquoise, classic white, or even gold for whimsy. Attach baskets to the front and back with simple wire ties or hooks. Line the baskets with cocoa fiber or burlap to hold soil, then fill them with potting mix. Choose plants that will trail or spill, like lobelia, nasturtiums, or creeping jenny, so the flowers cascade as though they're riding the wind. Place the bicycle somewhere visible, perhaps near your front porch or along a garden path, so it greets you with surprise each time you pass. You don't need to bend or strain, simply water the baskets with a gentle pour and watch them bloom. I once visited a small town where a cafe owner placed a bright yellow bicycle outside her shop, its baskets filled with lavender and daisies. She said, "It's not just decoration, it's a welcome sign." People stopped to take pictures. Children giggled at the sight, and the whole street seemed brighter because of that simple idea. The beauty of a bicycle planter is that it blends nostalgia with creativity. It's a reminder of journeys once taken of freedom and play, now rooted in stillness, yet blooming with new life. And isn't that a reflection of us, dear friend? We may not ride as fast or as far as before, but we can still carry joy. We can still stand steady and full of color, offering delight to those who pass. So, if you have an old bicycle hidden in the shed, don't think of it as useless metal. Think of it as a vessel for flowers, a memory on wheels that still has one more ride left, straight into the heart of your garden. Do you remember the wooden shutters that once framed the windows of old houses, opening to let in morning light or closing against summer storms? Over the years, paint peels, hinges rust, and they're often discarded when homes are remodeled. But dear friend, those shutters can still stand tall with purpose. In the garden, they transform into a vertical wall, a backdrop for hanging plants, a stage for small treasures, and a story of resilience told in wood and color. Picture this: a weathered shutter leaning gently against a fence or mounted to a garden wall. Its slats, once built to filter light, now cradle tiny pots of herbs or succulents. Hooks screwed into the frame hold watering cans, lanterns, or even baskets of trailing ivy. Instead of shielding windows, it now shelters blossoms, creating a living tapestry that changes with the seasons. Here's how to begin. Find an old shutter. Wooden ones work best, though even metal can be used. Brush off dust, but don't worry about imperfections. Every scratch adds charm. If you like painted in cheerful colors, a soft mint deep barn red, or even leave it rustic and faded. Secure it to a fence or wall with simple brackets, or let it lean sturdily where it won't topple. Slip small terracotta pots or tin cans between the slats, nestling them like books on a shelf. Or screw hooks into the wood and hang lightweight planters. Herbs like parsley, thyme, or chives thrive in this setup, as do cheerful flowers like pansies or petunias. For a touch of whimsy, you might hang little signs, "Welcome Bloom," or even the names of your plants. I once visited a neighbor who had lined 3 shutters along her porch wall. Each one was painted a different shade of blue, and each carried pots of trailing green. She told me, "They remind me of the house I grew up in, but now they live outside with me." Her shutters no longer shaded a window. They shaded her herbs from the harshest sun, a new role with familiar grace. The beauty of a shutter wall is how easy it is to tend. The plants are lifted closer to your eyes, and hands no bending required. And because everything is vertical, it saves space, perfect for porches, patios, or small yards, where every inch counts. And isn't there something symbolic here? Shutters were made to open and close, to protect and reveal. In the garden, they continue this work, not guarding glass, but nurturing life. They remind us that even when we're no longer in our first role, we can adapt, still framing beauty, still letting light through. So, dear friend, the next time you see an old shutter by the curb, don't pass it by. Imagine it instead as a garden wall, a canvas for blossoms, a reminder that even what no longer fits indoors can flourish outdoors in the open air. Do you remember the old suitcase that once held your belongings on family trips? Its handle worn from being carried through train stations, bus stops, or airport halls. Maybe it sat beneath your bed for years, filled with mementos you couldn't quite part with. Over time, latches weaken, corners fray, and newer luggage takes its place. But dear friend, an old suitcase can still travel this time into your garden as a unique planter full of charm and story. Picture it propped open in the sunlight, its fabric lining faded but still soft, now filled with rich soil. Instead of socks and dresses, it overflows with marigolds, basil, or even lettuce leaves spilling gently over the edges. The suitcase becomes a treasure chest, not of clothes or trinkets, but of life itself. Flowers and food sprouting where memories once rested. Here's how to make it: choose a sturdy suitcase, ideally one with a hard shell or firm frame. If the lining is worn, don't worry. Place a sheet of plastic or an old shower curtain inside to protect it. Be sure to poke a few drainage holes in the bottom or line the base with pebbles to keep water from pooling. Fill the suitcase with potting soil nearly to the brim. Then tuck in plants that bring joy or usefulness, cheerful pansies, fragrant herbs, or even strawberries for a sweet surprise. You can close the lid halfway to create a layered look, planting in both the base and the tilted lid. Or leave it fully open like a display of abundance. Place it on your porch beside a garden bench or under a shady tree where it feels like a secret discovery. I once knew a woman who used her father's old leather suitcase for this very purpose. She planted lavender inside, and every time she brushed the flowers, their fragrance mixed with the scent of worn leather. She said, "It feels like the suitcase still carries something precious, only now it's life." The beauty of a suitcase garden is how accessible it is. Raised off the ground, it spares you from stooping. Lightweight plants make it easy to manage, and because the suitcase has handles, you can even move it if you'd like to change its place. And perhaps there's something deeper here. A suitcase is a symbol of journeys of movement, discovery, and change. By turning it into a planter, we acknowledge that even when our traveling days grow fewer, we can still nurture new adventures right where we are. The journey doesn't end. It simply takes root in the soil of today. So, dear friend, if you have an old suitcase collecting dust, don't let it fade unseen. Fill it with soil, plant it with beauty, and let it become a vessel of growth, proof that every story, no matter how worn, can bloom again. Do you remember the teapot that once poured countless cups of comfort, steam rising on quiet mornings, or laughter shared around a kitchen table? Over time, perhaps its lid chipped or a crack traced its way down the porcelain. It may no longer be fit for the table, but, dear friend, it can still pour out joy, this time for the little birds who visit your garden. A teapot with its curved spout and rounded body makes a delightful birdhouse offering shelter as charming as it is practical. Picture this: a teapot hanging gently from a tree branch, its handle looped with sturdy twine, the spout pointing out like a welcome sign. Inside, soft straw or moss cradles a tiny nest. A sparrow peeks out from the lid's opening, or a wren perches proudly on the spout before flitting off. What was once a vessel for tea has become a vessel for life, adding music and motion to your garden. Here's how to make it: find an old teapot, porcelain or metal, preferably one with a wide opening. If the lid is intact, remove it to give the birds easy entry, or secure it slightly ajar with glue so they can slip inside. Thread a strong rope or chain through the handle, tying it securely so the pot hangs level. Fill the base with soft nesting material like straw, shredded paper, or dried grass. Then hang it in a shaded, quiet spot, perhaps from a tree branch, a pergola, or even a porch hook. For an added touch, you might paint the pot in cheerful colors, or let its chips and cracks remain as part of its story. Either way, the birds will find it welcoming. Just be sure to place it somewhere sheltered from heavy rain and far from prowling cats. I once visited a gardener who had hung 3 mismatched teapots along her fence, each one a little haven. One held finches, another wrens, and the third became a resting place for chickadees. She told me, "It feels like tea is still being served here, only now it's hospitality for wings." And isn't there something beautiful in that thought? The teapot may no longer pour tea, but it still pours kindness. Just as we in our later seasons may no longer serve in the same ways we once did, yet we still offer warmth, still provide shelter, still bring life to those who gather near. So, dear friend, don't throw away that cracked teapot. Hang it up, fill it with softness, and let the garden's smallest guests make it their home. In return, they will gift you with song, reminding you daily that usefulness, like love, never truly ends, it simply changes form. Do you remember the shiny CDs that once filled our shelves, holding music for long drives, photo albums of family vacations, or computer programs from years gone by? Many are now scratched or outdated, tucked into boxes, or gathering dust. But dear friend, those rainbow discs don't need to be forgotten. Their shimmering surfaces can find a new life in the garden as mosaics on stepping stones that sparkle with light like bits of captured sky. Picture this: a winding garden path, each stone inlaid with fragments of CDs. In the morning sun, they glisten with blues, purples, and greens like dragonfly wings scattered across the ground. At twilight, they catch the fading light, glowing softly as though tiny stars have fallen into your walkway. Each step becomes a small moment of wonder, reminding you that beauty often comes from what we thought was broken. Here's how to begin: gather a few old CDs, no matter how scratched. Snip them carefully with scissors into small pieces, triangles, squares, or irregular shards. Take plain stepping stones or pavers and spread a layer of strong outdoor adhesive or mortar across the surface. Press the CD pieces gently into the mixture, shiny side up, arranging them in patterns or random scatterings. Once the adhesive dries, smooth grout can be brushed between the pieces to seal them in, making the surface safe to walk on. If bending to ground level is difficult, you can work on the stones while they're set on a table, then place them in the garden later. Even a single mosaic stone at the base of a bird bath or porch step can add unexpected sparkle. I once visited a friend whose grandchildren helped her with this project. Together they cracked CDs into shards, laughing as the light scattered across the room. Later, when the stepping stones were finished, the children said it was like walking on rainbows. Each stone held both color and memory, glowing with the joy of shared creation. The beauty of CD mosaics is their accessibility. The work is simple, can be done slowly at a table, and doesn't require perfection. Each shard finds its place, much like each of us, adding to a larger picture. And in the end, something outdated becomes timeless, glimmering in a garden where it might otherwise have been trash. And isn't that a reflection of life itself? What was once scratched, forgotten, or set aside can still catch the light in breathtaking ways. The CDs may no longer sing their old songs, but in your garden, they create a new chorus. Silent, sparkling, eternal. So, dear friend, gather those discs tucked away in drawers. Break them gently, piece them together, and watch as your garden path becomes a trail of rainbows under your feet. Do you remember the old wheelbarrow that once carried heavy loads of soil, firewood, or autumn leaves across the yard? Its handles may now be splintered, its tire flat, its body rusted from rain. For many, that would mean it's ready for the junk pile. But dear friend, the garden whispers a gentler truth. An old wheelbarrow can roll into a second life as a charming flower cart, a movable bed of blooms that adds both beauty and story to your space. Picture it sitting beneath a tree, its basin overflowing with trailing petunias, bright marigolds, or fragrant herbs. The rust and dents don't hide its usefulness, they highlight it, turning the cart into a rustic sculpture of resilience. And because it has handles, you can shift it easily if you want to follow the sun or change the view without the strain of lifting heavy pots. Here's how to make it: clean out the wheelbarrow, brushing away dirt or rust flakes. If the basin has holes, that's wonderful, they act as natural drainage. If not, you can drill a few small ones in the bottom. Fill the cart about 2/3 full with lightweight soil. Because it's shallow, choose plants that thrive without deep roots, cheerful annuals, leafy greens, or even strawberries. For extra charm, let trailing plants spill over the edges, softening the hard lines with green cascades. You can leave the wheelbarrow, weathered its scars. Speaking of years of hard work, or painted in cheerful colors, sky blue, sunflower yellow, or classic white. Place it near a porch, along a pathway, or even as a centerpiece in the yard. Wherever it rests, it will feel like a moving bouquet caught mid-journey. I once knew a neighbor who filled her grandfather's old wheelbarrow with begonias and ivy. Every spring she wheeled it out from the shed, gave it fresh soil, and planted anew. She said, "It feels like he's still helping me tend the garden." That cart no longer carried stones and wood, but it carried memory, love, and color. The beauty of a wheelbarrow planter lies in its accessibility. It raises the plants up so you don't need to bend low. You can water, trim, or harvest at a comfortable height. And if weather changes, you can roll it beneath shelter or into the sun with just a gentle push. And isn't that a beautiful metaphor? Once built for heavy burdens, the wheelbarrow now carries only lightness and joy. It reminds us that even when our days of labor pass, our strength can still be channeled into something bright, something that feeds the soul instead of the body. So, dear friend, don't discard that tired cart. Fill it with blooms, let it rest proudly in the garden, and let it show that usefulness never truly rusts, it simply blossoms in new forms. Do you remember the old metal bed frame that once held a mattress steady, supporting countless nights of rest and dreams? Its bars may now be bent, its paint chipped, its purpose long outgrown. Many would send it to the scrapyard. But, dear friend, a bed frame is built to hold weight and stand strong, and that strength can still serve. In the garden, those iron bars transform beautifully into a trellis guiding climbing plants toward the sky. Picture it standing upright at the edge of your garden, its curved headboard rising like a gate from a fairy tale. Vines of morning glory curl up its sides, blossoms opening like lanterns each morning. Beans or cucumbers weave through its bars, dangling like ornaments. What once held rest indoors now holds life outdoors, a structure of grace and endurance. Here's how to make it: take the headboard and footboard of the frame. These often have the best vertical structure. Brush off rust, and if you like, coat them with outdoor paint to preserve them. Sink the legs a few inches into the soil, or secure them with stakes so the frame stands steady. Plant climbing flowers or vegetables at the base: sweet peas, clematis beans, or even grapevines. With time, the plants will reach upward, filling every curve and bar with green blossoms and fruit. You can also set two frames opposite each other and connect them overhead, forming an archway. Imagine walking beneath it, shaded by tendrils of flowering vines. Even in small yards, a single upright frame makes a strong statement, part art, part function. I once visited a gardener who turned her parents' old iron bed into a rose trellis. Red climbing roses wound their way around the headboard, bursting into blooms each summer. She said, "It feels like the bed is still cradling love, only now in a different way." The structure no longer supported a mattress, but it supported beauty that welcomed everyone who passed. The charm of a bed-frame trellis is its height and sturdiness. It brings plants up where they're easy to admire and tends sparing you from crouching. And it transforms something ordinary, even forgotten, into something striking, a centerpiece that draws the eye. And isn't that a reflection of us, dear friend? What once carried rest can still carry growth. Our roles may shift with time, but our strength, our ability to support others, remains. The bed frame reminds us that foundations never truly fade. They simply change what they hold. So before you send that old frame away, pause. See its curves not as junk, but as lines ready to be traced by vines. Place it in your garden, let it rise once more, and watch as it turns from scrap metal into a doorway of life. Do you remember the woven baskets that once held apples from the orchard, knitting yarn beside your chair? Or perhaps fresh bread brought to the table? Over time, the handles may have frayed, the weave loosened, and they were set aside in closets or attics. But dear friend, baskets were always meant to hold treasures, and in the garden they can do so again, this time cradling blossoms that spill gracefully over their sides. Picture a worn wicker basket hanging from a porch beam or tree branch lined with moss and filled with bright flowers. Petunias or trailing ivy cascade down, swaying gently in the breeze. The basket itself, weathered and soft with age, becomes part of the charm, blending naturally with the plants as though they've grown together. Here's how to begin. Take your old basket, no matter its shape, round, oval, or square. Line the inside with burlap cocoa liner or even an old ragged towel. This keeps the soil from falling through the gaps while still allowing drainage. Fill it with lightweight potting soil, leaving a little room at the top. Then tuck in plants that trail and spill lobelia nasturtiums or sweet potato vines. For a touch of fragrance, add lavender or mint, which will release their scent when the wind stirs. Hang the basket securely with strong twine rope or a metal hook. Choose a spot that is easy to water without stretching too far, a porch corner, a fence post, or beneath a shady tree. Within weeks, your basket will brim with life, turning something forgotten into a garden jewel that greets you each time you step outside. I once visited a friend who hung 3 baskets along her porch, each one filled with different blooms, purple petunias, white alyssum, and yellow marigolds. She said, "It feels like my porch is wearing jewelry." And it was true. The baskets shimmered like earrings on the house itself, dressing it with simple elegance. The beauty of basket gardens lies in their accessibility. They can be prepared while sitting at a table with no bending or digging. And once hung, they bring the plants up to eye level where you can enjoy them with ease. And isn't that symbolic? A basket may no longer carry apples or yarn, but it still carries life. Its shape may sag, its weave may loosen, but with soil and seed it becomes radiant again. Much like us, it holds beauty, not because it is flawless, but because it continues to give. So, dear friend, before you toss that weary basket, pause. Imagine it overflowing with flowers, swaying with the wind and bringing grace to your garden. Let it remind you that usefulness, like love, can always be woven back together. Do you remember the jars of jam, pickles, or preserves that once lined your pantry shelves? Over time, the jars may be gone, but the lids remain brightly colored, a little dented, stacked in a drawer. Most people toss them without a second thought. But, dear friend, those jar lids can dance again, this time as part of a wind chime that sings softly in your garden. Picture it, a row of metal lids painted in cheerful colors or left rustic, hanging from twine beneath a porch beam. As the breeze stirs, they clink together gently, creating a soft, tinkling music. Sunlight glints off their surfaces, and suddenly the air itself feels playful. What was once just a forgotten lid becomes part of a song shared with the wind. Here's how to make it: gather several jar lids, large and small. If you like, paint them with outdoor acrylics or cover them with bits of patterned fabric. Use a nail and hammer to make a small hole near the edge of each lid. Thread string, twine, or fishing line through the holes, tying knots to secure. Attach each lid at different lengths to a sturdy stick, a piece of driftwood, or even an old coat hanger. Hang the whole piece in a breezy spot on the porch near a window or by your favorite chair in the garden. For added charm, mix in other recycled pieces, keys, shells, or beads to create variety in the sounds. Every lid with its slightly different size and weight will bring a different note to the chime. I once visited a woman who had strung a dozen jar lids from an old rake head hung above her herb garden. Each breeze sent them tapping lightly like laughter in the air. She said, "It reminds me that even small things, when brought together, can make music." The beauty of this project is how simple it is. No heavy lifting, no bending, just threading and tying, something you can do at a table with your hands and imagination. And once hung, the chime asks for nothing but wind offering joy in return. And isn't that a gentle truth for us as well? We may feel small, dented, or forgotten at times, yet when strung together with love, we still create harmony. A lid alone is silent, but together they sing. So, dear friend, before you throw away those jar lids, pause. Imagine them clinking in the breeze, playing a song just for you. Let them remind you that beauty and music can come from the humblest of things. Do you remember the creak of old windows being opened on summer mornings, letting in the scent of fresh-cut grass, or the sound of children playing outside? Perhaps those windows grew drafty with age, their panes streaked their frames, chipped. When houses are renovated, they're often discarded. But dear friend, windows are meant to let in light, and in the garden they can do so again, reborn as the walls and roof of a small greenhouse. Picture it: 4 or 6 weathered window frames joined together, standing like a tiny cottage in the garden. Inside, tender seedlings stretch toward the sun, sheltered from wind and chill. The glass catches the morning light, glowing softly like a lantern, while raindrops beat along the panes like silver jewels. It's not just a greenhouse, it's a storybook house for plants stitched together from fragments of memory. Here's how to begin. Collect old window frames, ideally ones with glass still intact. Scrub them gently, keeping their rustic character. Arrange them into a box shape, fastening the corners with screws, hinges, or even simple brackets. A pair of windows can form the roof, set at an angle to let rain slide off. Place the structure over a raised bed or directly on the ground where you plan to grow. Inside, tuck seedlings of tomatoes, peppers, or herbs that need a warm start. The windows will trap heat and light, cradling young plants until they're strong enough to thrive outdoors. If lifting is difficult, you can build the greenhouse in place, propping the windows up against one another like cards leaning together. Even a single window laid flat on bricks can protect a shallow bed of greens from cool nights. I once visited a gardener who had made a greenhouse entirely from her grandparents' old farmhouse windows. Each pane held scratches and waves of glass, but together they shimmered beautifully. She told me, "It feels like their house still shelters me, only now it shelters my plants." The charm of a window greenhouse is its intimacy. Unlike large structures, it can be small, personal, easy to tend without bending too much. And it carries a quiet poetry. Windows that once looked out onto the world now open a new view inward onto growth and life. And isn't that how we live too? Even when one chapter closes, the frames of our lives can still hold light, still protect what is tender and new. A window never forgets its purpose: to shine, to shelter. And neither do we. So, dear friend, if you come across old windows at a yard sale or in your own attic, don't see them as junk. Imagine them as walls of glass standing in your garden, offering warmth and light to seedlings and hope to your heart. Do you remember the tires that once carried your family's car down winding roads through summer vacations or to quiet Sunday drives? Eventually they wore thin, replaced and set aside, often left in the garage or hauled away. Most see them as nothing more than waste. But dear friend, even a tire can cradle life again, this time not rolling on roads, but resting still as a pond in your garden, a mirror of water that reflects the sky. Picture it: a circle of stone and greenery in your yard with a tire hidden beneath. Inside, clear water shimmers, dotted with floating lilies or simple water lettuce. A bird flutters down to sip, dragonflies hover, and the pond becomes a living jewel. What was once rubber and tread now holds peace, drawing wild visitors and quiet moments. Here's how to make it: take an old tire and lay it flat on the ground. With a sharp knife or saw, you can cut away the top rim, creating a clean, wide opening. Place the tire where you'd like your pond. Some prefer to sink it into the soil so it sits level with the ground. Others leave it slightly raised for easier access. Line the inside with a pond liner, thick plastic, or even a cut piece of tarp, pressing it snug against the walls. Fill with water, then add stones around the rim to hide the tire's edge and blend it into the garden. If you wish, place a few water plants inside: lilies, lotus, or even a sprig of papyrus. Add a small solar fountain to keep the water moving and fresh. Within days, you'll find birds stopping by, butterflies resting on the edges, and perhaps even frogs making it their home. I once knew a couple who transformed 4 old tractor tires into a series of small ponds. They planted each with different water plants, lotus in one, lilies in another, and reeds in the third. The fourth they left clear, simply reflecting the clouds. They said it's like having a piece of the lake in our own backyard. The beauty of a tire pond is its accessibility. Small and contained, it doesn't require deep digging or heavy labor. You can build it at your own pace, even seated nearby, arranging stones and plants with care. And once complete, it offers endless moments of quiet reflection, a sanctuary of still water. And isn't that what we long for in life's later seasons? A place to rest, to mirror the sky above us, to invite songbirds and light into our days. A tire once rushing along highways now sits in stillness, yet in that stillness it becomes more alive than ever. So, dear friend, don't dismiss that worn-out tire. Place it in your garden, fill it with water, and let it remind you that rest can also be fruitful, and that even in stillness, beauty flows. Do you remember the mirrors that once hung proudly in your hallway or bedroom, reflecting your face each morning as you prepared for the day? Over time, perhaps one slipped and cracked, or the silver backing began to fade. Most would consider a broken mirror bad luck, rushing to throw it away. But, dear friend, in the garden, even shattered glass can shine again, pieced together as a mosaic that scatters light like 1,000 tiny stars. Picture it a wall planter box or stepping stone decorated with fragments of mirror, each shard catching sunlight at a different angle. In the morning, the surface glitters like dew. At sunset, it blushes with warm tones of amber and rose. Butterflies flutter past their wings, flashing in the same way. What was once broken now becomes dazzling, turning imperfection into art. Here's how to begin. Take your broken mirror and carefully wrap it in cloth before gently tapping with a hammer to create smaller pieces. Wear gloves to protect your hands. Choose a surface for your mosaic. A section of garden wall, a wooden board, a stone planter, or even a stepping stone. Spread a layer of outdoor adhesive or tile mortar, then press the mirror pieces into place. Arrange them in swirls, flowers, or simply scatter them freely. Once dry, apply grout between the pieces, wiping away the excess until the design gleams. You don't need to cover a large area. Even a small patch of mirror shards can transform a dull corner into something magical. If bending is difficult, work on boards or pots at a table, then place them outside when finished. I once knew a woman who covered the side of an old bird bath with broken mirror pieces. When the sun struck it, the whole garden seemed alive with light. She said, "It feels like the stars came down to visit me." What others would have seen as trash, she had turned into a constellation at her doorstep. The beauty of mirror mosaics lies in their symbolism. A mirror may shatter, but each piece still reflects light. It reminds us that even when life leaves cracks, we do not lose our brightness, we simply shine in different directions. So, dear friend, don't toss aside that broken glass in sorrow. Pick it up gently, place it with care, and let your garden walls sparkle with resilience. For in every shard lies the power to reflect beauty, proving that even in brokenness we remain radiant. Do you remember the old wooden boards stacked in the shed, maybe once part of a fence, a shelf, or a crate? Weathered and worn, their surfaces rough with time, they seem too tired to serve again. But, dear friend, wood carries memory in its grain. With a little care, even a discarded plank can become a rustic garden sign, a marker of welcome, a whisper of personality that gives your garden its own voice. Picture it a faded board brushed with white paint letters, handwritten in dark strokes, spelling herb garden or welcome friends. The wood leans against a fence or hangs from a post among the flowers. The edges are rough, but that only adds charm, proof that beauty doesn't need polish. The sign doesn't shout. It smiles, guiding you gently like an old friend pointing the way. Here's how to begin. Find a piece of wood, no matter how imperfect. If it splinters, give it a light sanding, but don't erase its character. Brush on a coat of outdoor paint, or leave it bare, then write a word that brings joy. Bloom, peace, bird's corner, or even your family name. Use stencils if you prefer neatness, or freehand for a personal touch. For durability, seal it with a clear finish. Attach it to a stake and plant it in the soil, or hang it with twine from a branch or trellis. I once knew a man who painted an old barn board with the words "Grandma's Garden" in bright yellow. He placed it near the path to his mother's herb patch. Each time she walked past, she smiled, saying it felt like her garden had a name of its own. That simple board gave roots not only to plants, but to memory and belonging. The beauty of a rustic sign is that it requires little strength, just a brush, a word, and your imagination. You can sit at a table and paint it slowly, letting each letter carry meaning. And once placed in the garden, it speaks on your behalf, greeting every visitor. And isn't that how we are too? Our voices may soften with age, but we still leave messages for those who come after us. Words painted on wood can last through seasons, just as kindness lasts through years. So, dear friend, before you toss away that weary board, pause. Give it a word, a purpose, a place in the garden. Let it stand among your flowers, not as scrap, but as a storyteller, reminding all who pass that even the simplest things, when named with love, become timeless. Dear friend, as we've walked together through these ideas, I hope you felt what I have, that a garden is never just soil and seed. It is memory, story, and second chances stitched into the earth. Every old item we touched, a teacup, a drawer, a bicycle, even a broken mirror, reminded us that usefulness does not end with age and beauty does not fade when cracks appear. Instead, with imagination and care, life finds new forms. Perhaps as we grow older, we are not so different from these objects. Our edges may soften, our colors may fade, but within us still rests the ability to nurture, to inspire, to bring light. When our hands press soil into a teacup or hang a basket of flowers from an old chair, we are not just decorating, we are proclaiming there is still purpose here. There is still joy. The garden teaches gently. A broken pot shows us that cracks can cradle moss and tiny blooms. A wheelbarrow too weary to carry stones can carry blossoms instead. And a piece of wood rough with time can become a signpost of welcome. In every project, there is a lesson: we are never finished. We are always becoming. So, which idea spoke most to your heart today? Was it the sparkle of bottles edging a path, the laughter of wind chimes made from jar lids, or the quiet dignity of a bed-frame trellis rising once more? Whatever it was, hold on to it. Let it remind you that creativity is not bound by age or cost. You don't need money or youth to make beauty. You only need imagination, care, and the willingness to see potential where others see waste. As you step out into your own garden, may your hands still create beauty. May your eyes still find wonder. And may your spirit bloom like the flowers you nurture, resilient and radiant. Until next time, happy gardening, dear friend.